Thank you to Brian Schmidt for being here this morning. A very special session. Brian is the program manager and laboratory operations director at NCDMM. I didn't see any AIs popping in, but if you do have some sort of recording, please turn it off. It is not allowed. And with that, I will just turn it over to you, Brian.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. I don't know where everybody else is sitting. I'm in Central Time Zone, so this is a little earlier. This is in front of my business hours, so this worked out really well for me. So Chandler, thank you for putting this together. Appreciate the opportunity. So we'll just jump right into it. Technology and manufacturing readiness, TRL, MRL, and risk mapping. So this is going to be a high level kind of conveyance of information associated with MRAs. So the TRL and MRL criteria are all used in MRA, so manufacturing readiness assessments. So this is a little bit of an agenda, what we're going to go through today. Not going to be a long presentation, probably 40, 45 minutes. I encourage people to ask questions. Stop me along the way. Chime in, come off mute, however you want to interface, that's perfect. But I'm going to go through who NCDMM is, and more importantly, why you should care about anything that this guy has to say. What's manufacturing readiness assessment? That'll be kind of the basic overall understanding of the entire presentation, and how MRAs can be used as a tool to identify hidden opportunities and provide steps for optimization, how they identify risk, how they can provide strategic insights to manage those risks, and then how to prepare your process, your workforce, and facilities for just evolving through the manufacturing journey. So I look at it as a tool to be utilized, and we'll go through some of that here in a moment. First off, NCDMM, we execute government contracts. We have a manufacturing focus to ensure the warfighter always has a superior advantage. And what we mean by superior advantage is superior training, superior equipment, all of those types of things. Our mission is we are a nonprofit. We're an unbiased third party that can provide vetted technical manufacturing or optimized manufacturing solutions for the DOW, the Department of War. And how we have developed our reputation in the DOW is we're trusted, connected, experienced, and focused. Trusted meaning we provide vetted solutions. We've been in the industry for a long time. We do not hold IP, and we are just an unbiased third party. The kind of the cream of the crop rises to the top, so to speak. We vet those manufacturing solutions and can provide them, unbiased to our government friends. We are connected, so we have a culture of collaboration, and we'll get into some of this here in just a few slides. And then experience, we have experts within NCDMM, and we have a linkage to experts outside of NCDMM, and we're focused. We're focused on delivering the best solutions, the best manufacturing solutions to our warfighter. So this is kind of how we play. This is our graphic or Venn diagram of our collaborative strategy or our collaborative interface. So we work at the confluence of government, industry, and academia. So we don't typically, we do not staff up and staff down based upon our technical need. We assemble the correct team, the optimal team, to address any opportunity that we are provided. So you can see some of the typical outcomes for our projects in the periphery there. So ESOH compliance, environmental safety, innovation acceleration, MRL TRL progression, which is a pillar that I stood up here, process improvement, quality improvement, readiness improvement, technology integration. So not only can we provide a solution, but we can actually integrate that into either current systems or provide a richer system by integrating into other developed systems. Time and cost savings, time and money, always important. Waste reduction, and then workforce training. So all of the things that we can provide as an output, we can get training developed and provided to those folks that'll be using the technology. This is our model of interfacing with academia, industry, and government. We have alliance partners, so we can interface with those alliance partners, which are typically more often than not, the experts in whatever advanced manufacturing technology or manufacturing process. They're typically the experts. So how I like to say it is, if you contact us, we're typically 1 or 2 phone calls away from speaking with the industry expert or the technology or manufacturing expert in that area. So through having that deep, rich bench strength, we can assemble the optimal team to address any manufacturing challenge that we're faced with. We were started in 2003 and kind of proceeded with the model of good work gets good work, or good work gets more good work. So since 2003, we've been a not-for-profit entity providing optimized advanced manufacturing solutions to the DOW. So what should your takeaways be from here? So we have a vested interest in elevating U.S. manufacturing. We are a nonprofit. We do not hold IP. We're well connected within the manufacturing environment. So if you need a question answered, no matter how obscure or what have you, reach out to us and we can typically get to the root of or get to the SME, subject matter expert, within a phone call or two, a day or two. So we can provide that connection to those resource and solution providers, and with that bench strength, we can also create mitigation strategies or assist with creation of mitigation strategies to get you from where you are in your manufacturing journey to where you feel you want to be or where you need to be. I'll just pause right there, see if there are any questions about anything that I stated there. Give it that uncomfortable silence for a minute or two, or 5 or 10 seconds.
I have a question.
Sure, Tyler.
So you're saying you offer services to help companies find the right subject matter experts and hook them up for research and development or things like that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Anyone else? If not, we'll go ahead and continue. All right. So MRAs, let's talk about MRAs. So I was putting this slide deck together a while ago, and one of my coworkers walked by and said, wow, that's a very confusing slide. So I kept it the way it was because I wanted to give you an understanding that it doesn't have to be this convoluted, complex process. Okay. So across the top, you have your MRL levels, manufacturing readiness levels. They identify your manufacturing maturity. And then on the left side of the large Excel spreadsheet that I've broken out here, it will give you your threads or your manufacturing areas. And we'll get into more detail here, but I just wanted to give you a graphic. On the left-hand side is it's kind of a very high level Excel spreadsheet that provides a high level interface with manufacturing readiness assessments. That may not make sense right now, but it should here in several slides from now. So just wanted to give you a good complex, crazy graphic there. All right, what is an MRA? So an MRA was developed, the MRA or Manufacturing Readiness Assessment criteria was developed by the Air Force Institute of Technology. It can be accessed through those 2 DoD links. So you can go in there and it's a several 100-page document that you can read through, and there are actually digital sources that you can go and self-assess and those types of things. But it's kind of one of those things, if you don't have an SME and you don't understand what you're reading, you don't understand the technology, don't understand the manufacturing, then it can be skewed. The system can kind of be gamed. So it's a part assembly agnostic assessment process. So it's for physical products, assessing physical products, not software. So I want to get that out there real quick. It can be utilized as a communication tool. So going through the assessment, you'll identify areas of kind of deficiency. I don't want to say that in a negative term, but so you can understand where to best allocate resources and consider optimization. You can use it as a communication strategy or a communication tool to funding agencies or funding resources, Department of War, congressional, venture capitalists, etc. It's a known vetting or assessment process that can be used to communicate the state of your manufacturing maturity. And you can use things like, or phrases like, Mr. Funding Resource, I am at MRL 5, I can get to MRL 7 through X number of dollars, and having that third party understanding or providing that third party understanding bodes well to and promotes that transparency of communication. So being transparent in your communication where you are kind of provides a level of comfort associated with some of those funding agencies. So an MRA also, what it essentially does is it assigns a manufacturing readiness level, MRL, which indicates the maturity of the manufacturing capabilities. All right. Essentially, an MRA identifies manufacturing risk within a product or assembly. So an assessment, and I have that underlined and bolded, is not an audit. It's an assessment of a program's readiness to manufacture and produce its intended design. Sounds very basic, right? We'll go through, look at the manufacturing. It's a collection of hundreds of specific questions that are yes and no. So essentially, you go through the questions. If you can answer yes, go to the next MRL level question. If you answer no, then that's where you state. And I'll go through how that's ranked here in just a moment. So as stated prior, mitigation strategies and understanding where you can allocate resources, you can it can be used as a tool to assist in development of next steps in manufacturing or to mature your manufacturing. So once again, mitigation strategies, maturation plans, and development of business plans. So understanding capital expenditures, as an example, understanding capital expenditures that may be required to get you to that next level. Okay, MRLs and TRLs. Are anybody familiar with technology readiness levels? It seems as though most people have a familiarity with TRLs as opposed to MRLs. So technology readiness is a component of manufacturing. So you have to be at a certain technology level to get assessed or ranked as a MRL level. And I'll go through the relationship here in a slide or so. So TRL levels can be ahead of MRL levels, but MRL levels cannot be ahead of TRL levels. So they are, like I said, they're a complementary tool. MRAs indicate the level of maturity of manufacturing. TRLs are the maturity of technologies. So the transition questions are left to be answered with TRLs. Is it producible? Just because we have a technology doesn't mean that it can be manufactured or manufactured reliably. Production costs would be unknown. The viability of a technology and transitioning to a manufacturing environment can be questionable or at a minimum very expensive. And then there are supply chain considerations that aren't considered when looking at a technology readiness. So things like, hey, can we get the amount of material that we need to create the production quantities that we need to create this awesome technology? Any questions there? Okay. So this is a rough relationship between MRLs and TRLs. So essentially, if you look at breadboard in a lab is essentially a lab prototype. So you can't have a technology in lab prototype and transition it to low rate initial production. So that's where the MRL, TRL line up. But you can have a prototype in an ops environment and the manufacturing level. So it'd be TRL 7, MRL 4. You can have like a TRL 7 prototype in an ops environment, but it's being manufactured at a lab prototype in a lab prototype environment, if that makes sense. So the disparity between two, I haven't seen more than 2-level disparity because it just doesn't make any sense to have the expense associated with a qualified technology being manufactured at a production prototype level of manufacturing. It's just the cost delta there associated with that development. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So there's the business component of that as well. All right. So any questions about the relationship? And then I have a question for the audience. So what does an MRA identify? And with that uncomfortable silence, it identifies risk. If there's one takeaway, an MRA identifies risk within manufacturing. Okay, I talked about threads on the left-hand side of that Excel spreadsheet. So the 9 threads of investigation. So not only is it manufacturing, the physical manufacturing, but it's understanding everything upstream and downstream from the manufacturing process. So technology and industrial base, being able to understand that the technology exists and there's an industrial base that can, easily and effectively provide that technology. Design, technical data packages are a big thing, TDPs within the DOW. So being able to have your design solidified so that you can effectively create, as odd as this sounds, create the design. So create the intended design. So that would include all of the understanding of hardware, software, everything that is required to create it, and then assemble. Cost and funding, we want to understand that we have the funds available to be able to kind of stand up that supply chain, stand up that manufacturing capability, investment budgets to optimize manufacturing and costing, those types of things. Are the materials available in the quantities that we need? Process capability and control. So modeling and simulation is a huge thing, and it does not mean electronic modeling. It can be actually simply going down to the production floor, putting tape. Hey, this is where a workspace is going to be. We're going to be transitioning materials to here. So understanding, material movement and the capability of being able to do that. Process yields and rates are a huge component of that. This thread. Next is quality management. First and foremost, do you have a QMS or quality management system? Those types of things. Do you have inspection processes? Those types of things. Manufacturing workforce. Do you have the trained up, technically capable individuals to create this assembly or component? And then facilities. Do you have the facilities required to create, meaning both size, special handling, and movement? Some electronics manufacturer need static dissipative floors. So all of those types of considerations are there. And then manufacturing management. So planning, EPS, no. The electronic systems associated with ordering, planning, ERP system, sorry, slipped my mind. ERP systems associated with linking that all together and getting data based upon historical manufacturing so that you can make better decisions moving forward. So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to get that holistic? And I think you're kind of starting to formulate your own understanding, but why would you want to do this? Get this holistic understanding of your manufacturing, right? So products that are created through immature manufacturing processes typically cost more, have quality issues, and lower quality can be quality shipment, can include rework, internal rework from returns, those types of things. Unreliable schedule and delivery, we don't understand our costs, our yields, and our production. Inconsistent performance of a product and lower reliability based upon all of the things above. So assessing the manufacturing maturity, it plans for that future maturation. So being able to understand the path forward to getting yourself to away from a creation through sheer will and determination to a more holistic process that you understand all of the inner workings and you can allocate the resources to mature the areas of challenge or the bottlenecks. So understanding that level of risk, it assists in transitioning technology from that a great idea perspective to the physical manufacture. So designed to complement TRLs as stated previously, designed to set the stage for manufacturing risk mitigation, and then establish an understanding or expectation of where you want to be to achieve your manufacturing maturity and assist you in hitting those critical decision points. and being much more effective in doing so.
Can I
So
ask a
what?
question?
Sure, go ahead.
On that last page,
Sure.
Understanding the level of manufacturing risk. Provide what do you mean by manufacturing risk? What's the point of view from that? Is it because you're going to spend all this money and realize you can't manufacture it? Is it because you're going to manufacture a product that has risk to it? Like what? Can you explain that a little deeper?
Sure. So manufacturing risk, it can be cost risk, it can be quality risk, it can be yield risk, it can be supply chain risk. So essentially, we'll back up just a little bit more. Any risk in any one of these areas, right? So your technology industrial base may not be able to support the technology that you have chosen to implement or utilize for your manufacturer or in your product or assembly. The design, risk in your design. So if you have a design that is marginally complete, so 70 or 80% complete, and there are changes, that may change your manufacturing facility or your manufacturing process. So then you incur more cost, there's more risk, there are delays, those types of things. So cost and funding risk, just not having funds available to, do some of the or execute on some of the plans that you want to. So if you have a design change that directly impacts upfront costs and funding requirements, so there's a risk there. So it's always impacts time. So any one of these.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for asking the question. I'm a big proponent of if you have a question, somebody else has it too. They're just not willing to ask. All right. So we're going to get into like some of the who's and the whys, and then we're going to get into the actual process and what that looks like. So that should hopefully stitch some of these topics together or these discussion points together. So who should conduct an MRA? Anybody that is interested in understanding their manufacturing risk and being able to understand next steps to get them from where they are in their manufacturing journey to where they want to be. So if you have a prototype or you feel you have a prototype and you want to take it to low rate production or some type of production, get view and understanding of how to get there from where you are. And then engaging with the DoD or others for funding. It's a very transparent tool you can use to self-assess or get a third-party assessor to be able to provide an understanding to a funding agency of how you could use those funds. And why would you want to utilize an MRA? So it assists from transitioning technology to production. So it really encourages and instills an understanding of how to make good decisions with where to allocate money and resources. Unlike TRLs, and I don't mean this to sound like I'm bashing on TRLs, TRLs are absolutely a valid component of this. But unlike TRLs, going backwards in an MRL is possible and acceptable. And an example is if you institute a new manufacturing technology, it may require different manufacturing space, different manufacturing individuals. So your TRL or your MRL level will drop, but then it will quickly accelerate back up to where you were based upon you spooling up and developing that new technology. A low MRL is okay. It is identification of risk. And if you as an individual at a company or as a company feel that the risk is acceptable, then, by all means, let's go in with eyes wide open and understand that it is a risk. And one that is typically kind of identified is single source supply. So single source supply, depending upon your level of risk tolerance, that can be something accepted and worked on so that we have secondary and tertiary supplies. MRL transition absolutely is possible. I just went through that. New manufacturing processes made to be developed. Even if it's something that doesn't exist, you may develop it and understand that it can better accommodate your yields, rates, quality requirements, all of those types of things. It's going to step you back maybe in your production volume, but once you spool that technology up or that process up, you'll get right back to where you were and then even excel past. And then another example that I used before is manual process, updating it with an automated process. So there's a learning curve associated with that, either in individuals, understanding of technology, even implementation can be a hurdle that needs to be overcome. So everyone that gets into the MRL level, the competitive nature of entrepreneurs and manufacturers, everybody wants to get to a 10. That's the highest level, right? That may not be something that you can ever get to, just based upon the production volumes and just the Six Sigma equivalent process or statistical relevance of the amount of products that you're making may not be able to backfeed into an MRL 10. It's just the nature of the business.
Can you give an example of a company that did achieve an MRL 10?
Typically the larger OEMs,
The OEMs, okay.
Like Lockheed as an example.
Okay.
Missile systems, like actually the one-way aircraft, they are typically 10s. They have this statistically relevant volume. They are a highly designed, engineered system assembly. Now it takes multiple years, and we all hear about the hundreds of millions of dollars in overruns, right? That's why. So just to give you some, insight into the under the tent, nose under the tent type of stuff there.
I have a quick question on that.
Sure.
Is there like a rule of thumb as far as whether it's a volume or a dollar amount that determines once you have that kind of statistical relevance, like enough data to, infer information from, those kind of historical steps?
So there is, but it is essentially the identification of a risk. It's typically a percentage, and it would be entirely dependent upon the complexity of the assembly and the part. Say you were making pencils, I think a statistically relevant, would be 10% of whatever your delivery is. So something like that. If you're making one a year, maybe one a year is a statistically relevant example based upon your supply chain and all of the other things that roll up into the creation of that part or assembly.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question is finite, but their answer is it depends.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is the MRA like an official MRA document required to do work with the DoD? Is that okay?
Now, there are some contracts that have a manufacturing readiness assessment requirement. So that can be, but they're starting to write that into contract. They started writing these into contracts about 10, 15 years ago. But it's typically now on larger systems and larger, endeavors.
Brian, if I may, who would write these documents? Would this be done by a third party, kind of like analyzing a technology that you've developed, or would you write them yourselves?
So I can provide assessments. I've been trained by the Air Force Institute of Technology about 10 or 15 years ago now. I can provide assessments. There are several other individuals here at NCDMM that can provide assessments. You can self-assess, but you need to be able to provide, and I would also need to do this, but you need to provide proof of your answer. So just going down through and checking yes, no boxes is not it. There's needs to be substantive proof associated with your answer. So if you say, there's a question in there like, or do you have a QMS system, quality management system? If you check yes, they will require an understanding of why you checked yes, just as an example.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All good questions. I appreciate that. Okay.
What, real quick, do they consider, like, when they're going through those check boxes, do
Mhm.
they consider levels of employees as far as company sizes when it comes, quality system manuals? That's a heavy load.
It
And
is.
I mean, I get all that. So, but companies, 10, 15, 20 employees, they're not going to be involved with that kind of stuff so deep. So I'm just curious if that's part of the big picture look.
So big picture for engaging with the DOW would require a QMS system. It does not eliminate you from engaging with it. It would be an identified risk, right? It would give you an understanding that, okay, I need to develop this capability within my manufacturing to be able to more effectively engage with DOW, if that was your choice. Yeah. Okay. So what is needed? So we're going to go into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts and what the process looks like. So what's needed to conduct an MRA? So first and foremost, this isn't a system to be gamed. Just kind of embrace the system and take it for all of the information and awareness that it provides and the risk that it identifies. So willingness and active engagement. Subject matter experts on both sides. So we'll get into, and it even states right here in the fourth bullet point, the individuals that are required for the best interest of the company to be able to interface with to conduct an MRA. Collaborative, transparent communication. Hiding things does not bode well. The light will be shown on the things that have been hidden. This is not an audit. This is a conversation. If you're engaging with somebody like NCDMM, open, honest communication is vital. We can provide you with an understanding of how to mitigate any manufacturing risk that you may have or that it's identified. And then representation from the entire company. So, funny enough, operations, engineering, and finance may be one person, to Tyler's point, smaller companies. I get that, multiple hats. We just need to have that be able to have those conversations during the conclusion or the conducting an MRA. So just to close on that, so MRAs, they're a bridge between a good idea and the art of the possible within manufacturing. And what they do is they uncover any issues or highlight any issues or risks associated with manufacturing that can cause those costly production delays, helps you manage a budget and optimize your resources. Time's tight, money's tight, we get all of those things, right? But the faster I go, the behinder I get is kind of the mantra here. Now, this isn't the end of the presentation, but so everybody's been asking questions the entire time. I appreciate that. If there are any questions that I can answer here about the who, the what, and the why, like who should do it, who can do it, what it accomplishes, and why you would want to do it. Let's pause here for a moment. If there are any questions, and then we'll get into the process and what that is.
I've got a quick question on the who. I know for like certain technologies, your kind of quality system is also dependent on your like material suppliers. Like for example, our company makes, lenses, right? And a lot of our future customers want to know quality and data about the glass that we buy from glass suppliers. So I guess my point is, are your suppliers evaluated as part of that manufacturing readiness assessment?
Yes, so that's a great point, Elijah. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question. So you will dig down into your critical suppliers, and I talked about singular supply, right? You will have, and hopefully they're open and honest and willing to engage in the MRA activity as well, but we would go in and assess them. And we have actually found during an assessment that some of the critical supply, their MRLs were half of what the rolled up company, or in your case, like your company would be. So your processors are dialed in, great ERP systems, great quality systems, good understanding of your facilities and your workforce, But the one supply chain, it's kind of like, hey, Jim does this in his spare time on weekends, right? That's a risk. And that's a little bit more common than we would all like to admit. So thank you for that question. That's a great question. Anything else? If not, we can transition into next slide here. So I'm going to give you insight into some of the outputs that I provide and that should be provided after or during an MRA, and kind of what the process looks like. So this will be the total rolled up. I call this my scorecard. So there are main threads that we went through, those 9 threads, and then there are sub threads into each one of those. So what we can do is we can actually assess the thread, sub-thread, and these are all in those same 600 questions, which will give you some insight into maybe some quick wins. So if you look at E, process capability and control, this company's modeling simulation was well at low rate initial production, whereas their manufacturing process maturity and production yields and rates weren't well understood, so they ranked at a 4. So to get their processing capability and control up quickly, they can focus in on those sub threads to get that elevated. And I've seen some disparities within the major threads, sub thread disparity ranging within those sub threads, 2s to 7s, 2s to 9s even. So just to provide you an awareness that sometimes there are some quick wins. You are ranked at your lowest number for each one of those threads. So you go through the sub threads. If you see a low number of 4 and a high number of 7, that thread is ranked at a 4. That's just how that works. And it's a good visual representation of, hey, these are places I need to develop mitigation strategies. These are places that I need to allocate some resources. And it can provide an understanding of next steps and guidance just with this graphic. So this is how I conduct an MRA. So it's initial fact-finding conversation to determine what's being assessed. So we'll actually go through that spreadsheet that I showed in that crazy looking slide here, maybe 10 slides ago. It takes about an hour or two. It's virtual, or we can do it in person if you're close, that's fine. Just have a conversation about where you feel you need to be and where you think you are based upon those questions. So that's essentially a pre-MRA. So there'll be I'll send the document out. You can pre-assess, get a comfort level with that document. It's just, it's a couple hundred questions there, but get a comfort level with that, and then we can have our conversation. What we'll do is identify a pre-MRA or pre-MRL to get an understanding of where we're going to assess. So through that conversation, we may come out, okay, it looks like we're at about an MRL 4. That's where we're going to assess, and then we can go plus or minus from there through the questions. Just to provide some transparency, pre-assessments typically come in at a lot higher than the actual rigorous MRA activity. So you can go in at say we pre-assess at a 6, typically you'll drop a point or 2 through the rigor of an MRA, but not always. So here's to your point, Elijah, identify those critical suppliers and maybe reach out to them. And you can integrate, in their statement of works, hey, you need to do these things, like, hey, we want to go through an MRA process associated with this product or something of that nature. And we would define all of that scope so that they don't get caught flat-footed or. And then after the pre-MRA activity, we would go on site with required personnel. It goes from hours to days now, days of impact. Follow-ups may be required. So 1 or 2 days to sit down with those personnel, kind of go through the questions, and then follow-up may be required. Typically, it's the first half to 3/4 of the first day is going through the questions, and then kind of getting all of the information that's required to support those answers over the next quarter day to 1 1/4 days, and then with additional follow-up. Hey, Steve's not here today. He had to go do something. He's the only guy that needs to know that has the answers to those questions. So it'd be that kind of interface. Define the manufacturing readiness level and the CRA reporting. That's on me or whoever is doing the assessment. And then mitigation strategies is a collaborative engagement. We understand, okay, these are places we need to maybe allocate resources and time, develop an understanding of getting us or elevating that manufacturing readiness level in that thread. And then we can do an updated assessment in a time period to be determined based upon those mitigation strategies to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. So that's a very high level understanding of how that process would work from my perspective and how I execute these. It doesn't vary too much from this type of scenario here. Any questions about any of that?
Brian, what are the requirements for the different phases within SIB or SITR? Or are there in the DoD?
I don't know if there are any,
Okay.
but
Okay.
that's kind of like a lower tier
So that would be the
direct
early
contract with the
stages.
DoD. I don't know if they have any in there yet. But boy, if you went in there with an MRA under your belt, they would really look at that favorably, I would think.
Okay, that's good.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I designed my entire company on 3D printing because A, you don't need labor, it reduces waste entirely, and I can do it within the confines of a home. Okay. Now, the risk is very low personally because I started my business, didn't have to invest a ton of money because it's 3D scanning technology. Okay. So I have kept my risk very low personally. And what I'm seeing is here is in order to do business within this arena, I need to have facilities. I need to have quality aminos, which increases my risk personally exponentially, very uncomfortable for me as a business owner. But in order to do that, that proves that the risk is lowered for my buyer, but that puts all the financial burden on me personally, just in order to take the risk off of a multi-billion-dollar company to show that I'm good at what I do. So that transition of building my business and eliminating risk and being successful at it takes a huge hit when I start to play in this field, me personally. So how do you help people transition from I don't have risk and I'm not going to lose my house to, oh my gosh, I have a building, a payment, electricity, people I pay for. You know what I mean? Like there is a huge gap in assisting people that have really good ideas to help the human workforce. So that's where I struggle as a person like me to go in there and compete when I have a patent and other things going on and I can't do that risk for my 5 children. You know what I mean? It's just, so how do we make this happen?
So Tyler, unfortunately, this is not the first time I've ever heard anything like this. So first and foremost, the government is a horrible customer. They just are. Whenever I have folks contact me like, hey, I want to do business with the government, it's like, are you sure? Because all of those things, right? One of the most successful ways to mitigate that is to kind of get somebody, and for lack of a better term, get yourself underneath somebody that has a QMS system that you could utilize, has, rates, government approved rates that they can flow down to you, and utilize that type of relationship and develop a relationship with a company that has those things that you can benefit from. That's an easy way to minimize your risk, right? As you very keen observation, this is reducing risk to the government. I mean, that's what this process is for. It provides them an understanding of where you may be deficient and where they can provide funding to eliminate some of that risk. So it kind of is both ways. Sensitivity, with you were talking about monetary risk. All of the other ones are handled. So you're actually in a lot better space than you think you might be, because you're concentrating on one of the threads, right? So I sit in Huntsville, Alabama. We have a lot of engineers here. 2 engineers commonly get together and say, hey, we have this big idea. We're going to do this great thing. And they get together and they have the design knocked out of the park, material selection knocked out of the park. They have no idea of the business. They have no idea of the money. They have no idea of the quality systems, the yields, the rates, all of those things. I'll go and assess, they self-assess at a 7. I go and assess them at a 2 or a 3. It's the flip side of what you're actually talking about. You kind of have the business acumen associated with it and maybe not as strong in the design and development. It's just where does that risk lie? So it's government funding to be able to prop up those risks for you, right? As opposed to the risks for the government, because you have a lot of those nailed for them. That was a convoluted answer. I hope that kind of.
Yeah, it made total sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm very sensitive to that. I deal a lot with small businesses, small and mediums. That's kind of where NCDMM plays. It's always it's always a fine line. Very, very, I understand. Okay. All right. How do and can MRIs identify hidden opportunities for optimization of an already successful process? So, being able to provide an understanding through interface with SMEs, the art of the possible, right? We do it awesome now. We're knocking it out of the park, but what's the art of the possible? And I kind of stated it before, transitioning from the sheer will and determination to get it done to, hey, maybe we can really optimize and automate these systems and, really move forward in a more fluid manner. Areas prime for optimization. So, once again, upstream and downstream from where you sit in your manufacturing facility or process, maybe it's optimization of supply chain, maybe it's optimization of shipping and delivery, right? Or maybe it's optimization of supply chain and then optimization of our quality and inspection systems and those types of things. And maybe there's a feedback loop of associated quality deficiencies that can be traced back through your supply chain. And I think, Elijah, you were kind of mentioning some of those things or those types of topics. Identification of process bottlenecks, yields and rates, or specifically rates, associated bottlenecks with accommodating required rates. Vendor risk, once again, that was talked about a bit, and then quality risk. Can we effectively make a quality product? And then that third party perspective. I think that's what this really all alludes to. So bringing somebody from the outside in to put eyes on your operation, a trusted partner, may highlight areas that you don't know what you don't know. So some practical steps to increase efficiency, streamline workflows, and reduce the costs associated with manufacture. So the MRA is a structured way to identify those areas of opportunity and risk. Elevated areas of risks, like things like sole source supply, I mentioned that before, and DMSMS, which is diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages. So understanding, we have supply chain folks on our team and in our network that can provide a really good understanding of supply chains and single source supply and those types of things. Once again, identify process bottlenecks, whether it be workforce, whether it be the development of the business case or the funding challenges. So we've kind of touched on all of these points. So managing risks and supply chain dependencies, so it can provide those strategic insights. So, first and foremost, single source always throws up red flags, high level of risk. And for foreign supply dependencies, so just because you get your raw material from Jim's material supply down the road doesn't mean that that source isn't in a country that isn't friendly to the US. Or a more volatile country, whether it be, third world or what have you. Supply chain awareness or analysis, one of the big things that gets highlighted here is like counterfeits, particularly electronics, those types of things. Procurement based on best value. Let's understand, there were always, when I was doing technical procurement, there was always 3 suppliers. One that was high dollar, but hit the mark every time in quality and delivery. There was one that was like, they kind of, fly by the seat of their pants, but they're the cheapest, right? And then there's the middle of the road. So, based upon best value and what you need at the moment, great to provide the understanding internally and other. And then there's primary, secondary, and tertiary supplies that I touched on. It's always great to have a backup if your primary fails. So how to prepare your process, workforce, and facility for growth and evolving industrial demands or industry demands, sorry. So this is a great way to, going through an MRA, identifying some of those areas of deficiency. Hey, you may be knocking it out of the park at this point, but it will develop an understanding of if I need to do 10x of my production, these are the things that I will need to do or really invest in, whether it be capital expenditures or other workforce, facilities, all of those types of things. So it also transitions your folks into a more proactive risk reducing manufacturer. So people, once we go through this process, will understand, okay, they get an understanding of the upstream and downstream, what that looks like and how it impacts their day-to-day and potentially their future. And I said this before, dependency on sheer will and determination. Let's eliminate that. And then best in class manufacturing. So just getting exposure to another mind that has their engagement with those best in class manufacturers and how that maybe some of that technology can be applicable to your facility. And essentially, what are my next steps in my manufacturing journey? So when should you have an MRA? The best time to start was yesterday, and the next best time is now. So just wanted to throw that out there. That's kind of typically how I conclude this. And this is my contact information. So the conversation does not need to end here. If you need to reach out, phone calls are free. If you need linkage or access to a manufacturing technology or a manufacturing provider, give me a call. Let's set up some time to talk. In addition to this.
Okay. That was great. That was I have so many notes myself. This is very helpful. Does anyone else have any other questions for Brian? This is definitely not a good time to ask questions. I would encourage it.
Yeah,
Question.
Brian, if I could, maybe you had mentioned this too, what would the cost be from NCDMM to do one of these analyses, and how often do people need to have them done?
So you can have one, we can create mitigation strategies, and then that can be the end of it. It doesn't need to be a recurring thing. It's kind of in your best interest to have a reoccurring MRA.
Right.
It will be a much lighter lift the second time around, because we will just, if you felt you wanted to be at a 7 and half of your threads are at a 7, we won't reassess those threads. We'll just reassess whatever. Typically, the number that I throw that out is 20K, but it would take a much more of a discussion between yourself and myself to understand what that looks like, because it could be more, it could be less. If it's just your manufacturing facility, I think Tyler's would be a much lighter lift based upon you having your capability in your house and you're the guy that can answer all the questions, and just your supply chain. It's kind of like a singular supply chain, that type of stuff. But if you're doing aircraft and you want to start digging into alternate suppliers and identifying those, at-risk supply chains and getting down into the weeds a lot more, that would be more cost.
So
But
Sorry, go ahead.
the best way to do it would be have it written in a contract with another company and have it be a requirement for them from who they're supplying to, and then you can get your assessment for no charge.
So, Brian, if I could ask you two questions about this. First of all, is there a parallel entity that would do non-defense, non-secure kinds of businesses in manufacturing that's parallel to yours? That's the first question. And then the second is there something where it's different based on the level of what the government would define as advanced versus not advanced manufacturing? I'm just looking for the parameters on what the right companies are?
So we are DoD primarily, but we engage in commercial. I don't know of anybody that else in this environment that typically how this works in the DoD or DoW. Typical large OEMs have an individual on staff that is me. So they conduct assessments internally and they communicate to the government, those types of things. People that are nonprofit outside don't typically do this. We just have a very strong relationship with the DOW and the small and medium companies associated with engagement with the DOW. And I wanted to kind of elevate our assessment process and make it a little bit more formal. We did assessments prior to coming into this MRA kind of criteria, but it was based upon our personal understanding, knowledge, and experience associated with that assessment. So we could miss some things, not necessarily bad, but may have to pull in some other folks, and it was a little bit more cumbersome. And then your second question was?
So the question is like then about the advancedness of
Okay.
this, right?
Yeah. So that essentially the definition, you're playing with the definition of what advanced manufacturing is, right? So I think if it aligns, the definitions will always change, depends upon who you talk to. If it aligns with one of the DOW MIIs, manufacturing investment, or no, it's manufacturing institutes. There's 19 of them across the United States. So there's additive manufacturing, which is America Makes, just examples. The Robotics Arm Institute that is in Pennsylvania, western, right outside of Pittsburgh. There are biomimetic engineering ones. There are, there's a whole bunch of them. So if it aligns with that, I would say that it is advanced manufacturing. So it doesn't need to be, the awesome flashing lights and no people around. That's a lot to people equate advanced manufacturing with robotics and no humans, right? Advanced manufacturing can be implementation of cobots. It can be a very finite optimized process, just advancement from sheer will and determination and being able to effectively communicate why you feel your technology or your manufacturing process is advanced manufacturing, I think is much more beneficial and impactful than kind of throwing a tag on certain technologies. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like I'm just trying to get at for the benefits both of YBI and for these companies who the like image is of a startup, right? So Lockheed, the problem with thinking about Lockheed is we're like probably a century away from Lockheed being a startup, but like, is this one should think of Anduril when we're thinking of who you help, or are there other kinds of startups that we should be getting a mental image of?
So there are, just to give you a sense of startups I deal with here in Huntsville, I mean, they're 1 and 2 and 3 people. And
But what are they? I guess the question is, what are they doing that gives you the sense so people can relate to the thing they're manufacturing, if you will?
so there's a lot of high technology. So I have 2 and 3 person companies that are developing radar systems. So yeah, that's advanced manufacturing, but they're great at the ones and the zeros and have absolutely zero understanding of any physical metal components. It's humbling for me to listen to them talk about the technology, and then it's humbling for them. It's like you can't make that physical thing, right? You can route the wires to it, but that's an unobtainium material and nobody makes that. So then we got to dial back maybe not necessarily expectations, but their design and then come full circle. But so I would encourage if you have folks or anyone here on the phone wants to go through a pre-MRA, it's an hour or two, give me a call, we'll set it up and we'll walk through it has to be a specific part or a specific assembly. and we can walk through what that looks like. And feel free to go out to the DoD site, and that's on my slide there, or was on my slide, and take a look at the resources that they have available there. And then if you have any questions, if you do choose that route, if you have any questions and you want to reach out to me, feel free to reach out and we can discuss, like, what does this mean? There's a lot of terminology in there that's can get overwhelming. And from one MRL to the next, sometimes the overlying phrase is only changed by one word. So it's a very detail oriented, information heavy document.
So you think that, and I'm just spinning this through my own head. So our companies could potentially, our portfolio companies, we have a lot of non-dilutive grant funding. So they could apply and get awarded to have half of your services paid for. When should a startup engage? Like right away? Like what point? Are we a little bit of traction? We have a pilot, or we have a prototype, or we have an idea? I assume that's too early. When do you like to see them?
As early as possible. It's
Oh,
a
okay.
much, much, much lighter lift the earlier on you get engaged. So even
Okay.
if it's hey, I have a good idea, and we go through the process and we'll essentially have an hour conversation, you would get a holistic understanding of what we need to do to take your good idea to production.
Okay, great.
It's like, hey, there's 75%. It's like looking at the iceberg, right? It's like, hey, I got this stuff above water nailed, and then all this stuff underneath the water is eating your lunch, right?
Okay.
That just being able to identify those risks, or just providing awareness even early on, is monumental for the success.
So, and I'm sure Scott and I have different opinions on this, but as it relates to investment down the road, how does this help? Does that, does it give you some sort of, obviously, if you have an MRL 10, you're a proven company, but which one do you have to hit to make yourself attractive to investors? Your opinion. Okay.
6, 5, 6. Depends. I mean, but 5, 6 is a good solid number. 6 is right at the cusp of we have our manufacturing dialed in and we're ready to transfer to low rate initial production.
Great.
So that's a great spot to be for investment for another company. Hey, Mr. Company, I need to understand what you're going to be buying from me so that I can understand that I can hit those rates, and that there may be some initial investment in, and it's typically people. There, investment in people to, hit those numbers.
So that's after a phase 2.
Correct.
Pretty much. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So and how that looks without having so after phase 2, so you will have your critical design review is right there. Is it 6? The milestone B?
The phase 2, you can enter, I think, with a 3.4, and then you're
Oh,
supposed
okay.
to leave with a 6.7.
Oh, so this is funding,
Yeah.
SBIR?
Yes, that's what I'm
I'm sorry.
Scott always says, and because I always ask him for like specific facts, and he's like, I can't give you specific facts on this, but have your companies aim for getting a phase 1 at least. Maybe that's more, Scott, for pre-seed dollars. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm taking away two things from what Brian is saying is super important. The first one is this is all for people making things, right? Parts or assembly, right? And the second thing is like they can help you figure out if it's going to work, and then you really need to figure out if it's going to work, and like that's later in the risk cycle than the idea. And it sounds like that's like definitely after phase 1 and maybe at the end of a phase 2 if you're talking about a
Yeah.
SIBR, right? But like the private dollars don't want to do anything early at all, right? They
Right.
want to go as late as possible.
Right. And that's why I brought up SIBR sitters, because obviously that's how the majority of companies in this space are going to get that initial funding.
So with that being said, I would love to get some more holistic understanding of the relationship of the MRL levels and TRL levels and then funding.
Yeah.
That would help me. You said phase one, phase two, there's A, B, and C milestones in MRA. Maybe we can line them up with those.
Yeah, I just had what's the Google AI pull it up on my other computer. So I don't know if it's correct or not. I should probably look more into it. But yeah, I'm just kind of thinking for my own purposes for my job is how do I tie all this together and bring you in if that was to be the case at the right time.
Okay.
But it sounds like earlier the better.
Yes, earlier the better. It's a lighter conversation earlier on, even if it's a napkin and nobody knows about these things when you're at that stage, right? Even if it's a napkin sketch, it's like, hey, I want to make this thing, right? Having those conversations and providing that awareness of what lies ahead
Mm-hmm.
is monumental. So I hope this was helpful. Once again, conversation does not need to stop here. Feel free to reach out to Chandler or Scott. They have my info. You may have my info too via the meeting invite. Send me an email if you want to talk. Seriously. A lot of people are hesitant to reach out. It's like, oh, this guy that you'll find out I'm pretty easy to deal with.
All right, people want to help.
Yes.
People want to help. That
Yep.
kind of goes with all we've been saying. This was great. I really enjoyed it. It's very informational. I thank you so much for your time. Anyone else have any other questions? I know I've kind of bogarted the last 10 minutes to my own questions.
I've got a quick one if we have time.
Uh-huh.
So on the topic of, sitters and sitters and compliance and everything like that, for example, we're going after a phase one right now. It's perfect. Like it could have been, the topic could have been written for us, right? But one of the requirements is CMMC level 2, which we're working on, and we have to get that, in line by the time the award is granted. How would you rate the both the like difficulty of actually achieving it and then the importance to, prospects, whether it's DoD or, contractors of the like CMMC like cybersecurity compliance versus, the like physical operations side of like manufacturing readiness?
So the latest release of the Manufacturing Readiness Assessment Workbook has a CMMC component or a digital security component. We are for lack of a better term, third-party assessor, we meaning NCDMM. We can help you with that journey to identify pitfalls and what you may need to look at and those types of things. So I can connect you with my IT department here and we can help you. It would be a conversation and, no cost. And I'm not saying no cost for, coming in and installing whatever if you needed that kind of help, but to provide you an understanding, we're very much about all boats rise as far as manufacturing and manufacturing compliance and those types of things. So if you need a linkage to somebody that knows a thing, call me, I get you hooked up with them and we step out of the way. Like we don't need to be a pass through of any way, shape or form.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, one of my co-founders has been just hacking through the weeds of all that documentation, because we're basically on a timeline if
Yep.
we were to be awarded this grant. So I'm able to take you up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely do it. I'll get you connected with the right people.
All right. Anyone else? We have 2 minutes left.
That's when
Speak
all the
now.
magic happens.
I just wanted to thank you for the presentation, Brian. This was very helpful.
And that's how I was going to conclude. I do this all the time. I'm glad that you all engaged and asked questions because, this can go anywhere, right? So yeah, I appreciate it and I hope it was helpful in some form or fashion, whatever that looks like. But I know there will be questions after. Reach out to, Chandler or Scott or myself, and we'll get you some answers.
Absolutely.
Hey, Brian, I'm going to reach out to you too. I want to bounce a lot of things off your head because
Do
of
it.
your whole entire background.
I
So
love it. I fully expected you to reach out to me, Tyler. I love it.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.